Ja, godt folk. Da vi klar for å diskutere Europa og de autoritære verdensmaktene. Men det jo av og til sånn under en festival at ting ikke alltid går som en har tenkt. Det første at Åsa Linderborg har meldt sykdomsforfall, så hun kan ikke være med i dag. Og så det tydeligvis en misforståelse med vår tyske venn Matthias Weik. Han skal være purra og på vei opp her, men litt usikker på når han kommer. Det ikke så lett med sånne festivaler, det masse som skjer. Det noen som har veldig lyst til at vi snakker engelsk helt fra begynnelsen av? Eller så kan vi gjøre det sånn at vi begynner på norsk, og så kan vi slå over på engelsk når Matthias dukker opp. Are there anyone who insists that we speak English from the beginning? I see no one. Ok, da setter vi i gang. Og jeg heter altså Tom Hetland. Og tema for i dag, det de dårlige tidene for det liberale samfunnet rundt om i verden. De tre store, i hvert fall tre av de store verdensmaktene, USA, Kina og Russland, beveger seg alle i autoritær retning. Trenger ikke gå inn på hverken Trump eller Xi Jinping eller Putin her. Dere kjenner til det. Og spørsmålet da, hva blir Europa sin rolle i dette bildet? Blir Europa og EU den siste bastion for det liberale samfunnet? Eller vil Europa bevege seg i samme retning? Vi ser for eksempel hva som skjer i Polen og Ungarn. Og den som da skal innlede til debatt om dette, det Sten Inge Jørgensen, som forfatter. Han har med seg noen bøker der, hvis noen interesserte, så kan de få det signerte etterpå. Kritiker og utenriksjournalist i Morgenbladet, der jeg nå hører at det har blitt ro igjen etter mye sjau og spetakkel. Og Bent Sofus Tranøy, som statsviter, professor på Høyskolen i Hedmark og Høyskolen Kristiania. For noen år siden så fikk han Brageprisen for bok om markedets makt over sinnet, som kanskje noen har lest. Så da tror jeg bare vi gir ordet til deg, Sten Inge. Vær så god.
Tusen takk for det. Jeg kan... vi kan egentlig, det jo sånn, det har jo blitt sånn nå at verdensutviklingen skjer så taktfast at vi kan gå til avisene eller til nyhetsbildet i går. Sent i går kveld var det begynt å komme inn meldinger om at Donald Trump har instruert alle føderale byråer om å slutte å abonnere på Washington Post og New York Times. Dette altså bare ett av veldig mange eksempler på hvilken vei USA har lagt ut på. Og som Tom Hetland sa innledningsvis, dette jo ikke noe som skjer bare i USA. Altså det de tre største maktene i verden, også Russland og Kina, har lagt ut på samme vei. De blir mer autoritære for hvert år som går. Og så det ikke egentlig bare blant gigantene dette skjer, men også i det skal man kalle andre divisjon, der vi har Tyrkia og Brasil, så skjer også det samme. Og det har skjedd egentlig så fort at nesten ingen av oss har tatt inn over oss hva det som skjer, og vi har heller ikke engang, tror jeg, forstått alvoret i det. Men det da noen politikere som har det, og som prøver å se om de kan møte det på en eller annen måte. Og jeg tenker da spesielt på Angela Merkel og Emmanuel Macron, som kommer fra land som ikke... For eksempel Norge, vi vant til liksom, at stormaktene gjør noe sitt og sånn. Men for Tyskland og Frankrike så det ikke nok å bare sitte stille i båten og håpe på at noen skal roe seg. Men det også sånn at Frankrike og Tyskland alene ikke sterke nok til å hamle opp med disse andre. Derfor det tanken at man skal bruke EU som et motmiddel. Og så det jo noen som stiller spørsmålstegn ved lever vi ikke nå i en tid hvor også EU offer da, for disse samme kreftene. Og til det vil jeg svare at ja, det et absolutt tegn til stede. Men hvis vi ser hva som har skjedd da, for eksempel i Italia, når Lega, altså nasjonalistene og femstjernersbevegelsen, populistene, vant frem en regjering, det varte ikke lenge. Og hva det som har skjedd ved forsøkene når disse har forsøkt å samordne seg på europeisk plan, det jo at de ikke har fått til noen ting. Fordi de har veldig mye som skiller dem fra hverandre. Og det som nok mest dekkende å si om situasjonen i Europa i dag, at det fortsatt et stort flertall for moderate politikere. Og det sånn at også ettersom EUs befolkning støtter EU mer og mer, altså ifølge Eurobarometer, så har EU nå høyeste oppslutningen på 35 år. Det altså over 2/3 som mener at det bra å være med EU. Så har da disse fløypartiene moderert sine EU-standpunkt. Og i vår så gjorde jeg en serie hvor jeg intervjuet redaktører i Sentral- og Øst-Europa om den autoritære utviklingen, og de sa alle som en at det EU som bremsen i deres land. Hadde det ikke vært for EU, så ville de nok ha gått raskere ut på den autoritære veien. Og det mange eksempler på at EU har stoppet autoritære grep i Ungarn, selv om man kan si det har ikke hjulpet stort. Men også at Polen, der det ganske mange ting, der lista ganske lang over ting man kanskje ville sett annerledes uten at du hadde det presset fra EU. Så enn så lenge så tror jeg det lurest å betrakte EU som i hvert fall en motmiddel mot dette, men det langt fra løst. Altså i den forstand at EU kan si at vi liksom fri for denne trusselen. Det EU absolutt ikke. Men tilbake til da, denne ideen da, fra Merkel og Macron, som også har støtte blant en lang rekke andre EU-land. De tenker da at først så må du selvfølgelig kommunisere til folk hvorfor EU må bli en sterk aktør. Altså hva det som står på spill? Og det ene jo det at hvis vi tar USA, da, hva som trusselen fra USA, så det at forestillingen om å make America great again, det handler egentlig om en rebalansering i tråd med prinsippet om den sterkestes rett. Altså det multilaterale, rettsbaserte systemet som ble skapt etter andre verdenskrig. En fundamental komponent i det var at det var like spilleregler for alle, og like rettigheter for alle, små og stor. Så kan man si at det ble ikke alltid fulgt i praksis, men det har hatt enormt mye å si for små land som Norge. USA går inn i dette feltet og mener at de har fått dårlige dealer, og de nekter å akseptere og underordne seg for eksempel rettsinstanser som de ikke anerkjenner og så videre. Og dette en tendens vi har sett en stund. Når det gjelder Kina og Russland, så har begge det de kaller interessesfærer, hvor de mener at de har rett til å intervenere. Dette også i strid med folkeretten. Russland har gjort det da ved å annektere Krimhalvøya og ved å kjøre sånn proxy-krigføring i Øst-Ukraina. Kina gjør det nå i Sør-Kina-havet, hvor de i konflikt med stadig flere av nabolandene sine. Men problemet større. Altså, dette ikke bare territoriell utfordring. Altså, Kina for eksempel utvikler noe som heter et social credit system, sosialt kredittsystem, som når det på plass, hvis det får den formen mange frykter, så vil da kinesiske borgere alle rangeres. De vil få en poengsum i tråd med hvor gode borgere. Ja? Okay. China is now testing out a social credit system where if it is implemented in the way most observers believe it will be, then at some point all Chinese citizens will have a score according to how good citizens they are. And of course the measurement of being a good citizen is set by the regime. This is totally detrimental to all ideas we have about human rights. And remember that China will probably soon be the most powerful nation on earth. And there will be so many nations around the world who wants to import this system. You know, when United States was sort of the leader of the world, many countries looked to the USA for ideas. And today, we already have a situation where most countries are not democratic. Most countries are maybe semi-authoritarian, and they will, of course, look to China to get this technology as well. And then we have Russia, who is interfering in the elections in the Western world. It is already well documented that they might have played a crucial role both in the election of Donald Trump and the Brexit referendum. And in a country I know well, in Germany, they were supporting the right-wing party Alternative für Deutschland with hidden social media campaigns, for instance, spreading stories about young German women being raped by asylum seekers that was let in by Merkel or the political class. In France, Russian banks are supporting Front National, or now it's called Rassemblement National. Yeah. They are supporting them directly with funds, Russian banks. So Russia is also a threat on several fronts. And to give you an idea of how wide this attack from these three big powers are, Donald Trump, he wants to make it legal again to import ivory. In Russia, they are making laws against anti-gay propaganda laws. And in China, Women's Day is celebrated like a pink version of the Black Friday. You have, and then you go on to look at the big companies that are attached to, especially the USA. The power of these companies. It's hard to even, understand that Google is a private company because it is already a gateway to the internet. It has become a verb to Google. But actually, the algorithms of Google are extremely powerful. And the market value of Google's parent company is equivalent to the gross domestic product of countries like Portugal and Austria combined. If you look at the list of the biggest economies in the world, there are fewer and fewer countries and more multinational corporations. And those, of course, attached to one of these major powers can be used also as a tool in the future conflicts that we will see. And I think it is pretty clear for everybody that there would have been no GDPR, the new rules that came from the EU to protect the data privacy, without the EU, because no country alone could stand up against these giants. What the EU rules actually says is that all of us can, whenever we want, we can go to Facebook and Google, and we want to get all the information that they have about us. They have to send us everything. And if we want it all erased, we can demand that. And they have to do it unless they will get like really, really big fines. So it is already in this area. And you also see it now on taxation, that the EU is moving to stop some of the worst examples of tax evasion from these companies, and also their misuse of their market positions. So we have seen in the economic sphere that it makes sense to act as a European collective against these giants. But when it comes to the world of big politics, it is the logic is the same. You need the size. And the reason why these politicians think it is possible is that the EU has exactly those values that is needed as a counterweight to these countries. Human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, that is the key points in the EU's global strategy. And second is that if you don't have a common strategy, then the countries of the European Union will be split up by the big powers. And we have seen so many examples of that happening. Recently, when Turkey invaded northern Syria, Viktor Orban in Hungary stopped strong reactions from the EU. They can agree on some condemnation, of course, but stronger action is stopped. And this has happened so many times. If you look at what it means to be alone, you can look to Norway. You don't need to look further. When Navalny was denied to take part in the last Russian presidential election, there was total silence from Norway. when Liu Xiaobo, he was not released from detention even on his deathbed. We gave him the Nobel Prize, but we didn't criticize that. Both occasions, the EU did criticize this. And it's not because all of the EU countries are so much more concerned about human rights than Norway are. But it is, of course, because also to a big extent they can hide behind each other. They are not so exposed when they act as a group. But if this is going to be realized on a big scale, the EU needs to move from today's system where all nations have a veto to so-called qualified majority voting. You need to be able to isolate some countries that have positions that doesn't fit in. And this is where the debate is right now. And this is what is being discussed right now, and it's going to be really exciting to see if it's possible to move on. And if not, the EU can move on as a collective. Then, according to the Lisbon Treaty, some countries can go alone and integrate in this area. I think it's a minimum of 9 that needs to do it. But of course, if the 9, some of the biggest countries do this, it will have enormous effect and also will probably suck other countries to join them. The EU has, my argument is that the EU has probably greater potential than the US had to be a leader in global alliances. Because the United States has been very unpopular in many places, while the EU has a very good reputation. And if you look at today's situation, when Trump is in the presidency in the United States, we have already clear signs that Canada, Australia, and Japan, these countries, are totally aligned with the European Union. And then you have all these countries around the world that were former colonies of European Union member states. There are so strong ties between European Union countries and countries in the third world as well. So this potential, I think, is worth to look into. And the combined non-military presence of Europe in the world is much bigger than the US presence. So the potential for diplomacy also is really, really big. And if you look at this military dimension, of course, we have nothing compared to the United States. But what have the military supremacy of the United States brought them in the last decades? They couldn't even stabilize Afghanistan or Iran or Iraq. So there is it's a fundamental, I think, need to rethink what power is and to realize that maybe Europe actually do have some leverage in non-military terms. And then you have some who say that Brexit is a real blow to the idea about a strong EU in the world. But the UK has supported all EU positions from day one after Brexit. The Paris Agreement, the Iran Agreement, etc. And they have no illusions that they can form a new community with the United States on foreign policy. Actually, the UK has also gone now into the European Defence Corporation, even after Brexit. So even if Boris Johnson could be a fan of Donald Trump, that is not the case with the UK political establishment, and definitely not the British people. Then we have, in addition to the common foreign policy perspectives, we have the defense policy issues. We'll just mention that very briefly. There are now several initiatives being developed, and again, this points to Macron and Merkel. I mean, Merkel has said on 2 occasions that we can no longer take support from older allies for granted. These are really, really strong words. And Macron is also is put very much effort into this defense integration issues. And even though this is in its infancy, I think it is important to remember that when Sweden and Finland decided to take part in this, they actually left their neutrality line, because they were not like Norway and Denmark parts of NATO. But now they actually also joined this defense community. And I think for us Norwegians, it's really, really hard to fathom what's happening around us, why these countries are acting like they now do. And that's also why I wrote a book about it, which is, I brought some copies back here. But now, I understand that we have missed 1 panelist, but we are at least now 2. And I think this was a brief introduction, but it should set the tone maybe for some discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sten Inge, and I welcome our German guest, Matthias Weik.
Thank you.
And also Ben Sofus, I invite up on to the scene. Sorry about this misunderstanding, Matthias.
All good.
I hope you got the message, most of it.
I got it.
Yeah, very good.
At some points I see totally different.
Yeah. Yes. I just briefly introduce you. You're a writer, an advisor of strategy and financial issues. And you, together with your companion, Mark Friedrich, you have a company for financial advice. I think it's called Vermögenssicherung.
Yeah. Securing assets,
yes,
delivering real assets.
So you have to, I suppose, follow keenly the development both in economy and politics to give good advice to your customers and to your readers. So what future do you foresee for Europe for the coming years?
At the moment?
Yes.
Or should I be honest or should I?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have to radically change. What we're doing now won't work out. We try to solve problems by printing money, which works out for a while, like we had 10 great years, but it won't work out in the long run. We see that the euro does not work. The euro is far too strong for Southern Europe and far too weak for us Germans. Germany is getting stronger, stronger and stronger, and the others are getting weaker, weaker and weaker. If we stay and keep to the Europe, it will be just a couple of years, and then the Front National will win in France, then in Italian Salvini will be back, because those countries have no future under the euro, and we have to see that it's absolute nonsense to have different economies, like for example Germany and Norway on the one side, and on the other side Greece and Italy in one currency union with same interest rates. Like we need interest rates in Germany like +4, +5%, and Italy or Greece -5, -7%. Yeah, that's how it works. And the politicians in Germany said, "Oh, it's a political project," but we can do political projects. But on the other side, there's economy, and that they don't care. The economy does not care about political projects, and the people won't cope with it for a while, because everybody now in Germany who thinks rational thinks somebody has to pay the bill, and that will be us. And so it's just a matter of time till people in Germany will vote anti-EU parties like AfD. Because at the moment it's all fine, but we already see, like we've got now in Berlin a cut for real estate prices for rent. Yeah. But the politicians say, yeah, it's not possible. But on the other hand, they support the euro, and because of so much cheap money is in the property prices rise. Then we come to the army side. Like our army, thank God, is in a really poor and terrible condition. We won't do anything. But probably you would not laugh if I would stand here and say we've got the greatest and the biggest army in Europe. So, like an army was like now our Ministry of Defense said, oh, we have to go into Syria. Why should we go into Syria? A, we don't have the tanks because they don't run and our planes do not fly and our boats don't swim. So we can't go there. And on the other side, German people are over war. We don't want war, and we don't want to have our soldiers somewhere else, and we don't want to play the world police like the United States played. We don't want that, and we won't do it. And the parties who want to force that, they won't get elected because we're sick of war. And I think it's great. We've learned our lesson, and we don't want to play there. And we say it's an invasion if the Turkish go to Syria. And if our troops go there, it's not an invasion. I think Assad, and he's still the president of Syria, he's a criminal, but he still did not invite us. So If the Russians go there, they got called by Assad, okay. But if the Turkish or us go there, it's an invasion. And I think we have to solve this problem differently.
Matthias, just a question. If the EU sticks to the euro, what will happen to the EU in a couple of years? Or
it won't be there anymore. We have to, I'm 100% European. I lived 5 years in Australia and had a great life. Then I came back to Europe because Europe is the greatest continent on earth. But the good thing is, Europe is so tiny, and I just fly like 2-3 hours to come here. And in between there's Denmark, and in a circle of 2 hours, I've got so many countries, so many different cultures, so many different languages, so many different kinds of food, and I really love it. And the EU wants to make it all the same. We've got the same light bulbs. We have all the same regulations. Just one thing we do not have in the European Union, the same tax rates. We've got tax havens in the middle of Europe, which is absolute crap. We have the same light bulbs, but if I'm super rich and I move to Italy, I pay €100,000 flat tax. Our major companies, when you order something from Amazon, where's the bill coming from? From Luxembourg, yeah? We've got tax havens, and those politicians protect, like Juncker was for me, I couldn't take him for real. He said, we all have to be one, we are one. But all the major companies, the US companies in the middle of Europe at Juncker's place and do not pay tax and cheat on society. Sorry, this is not Europe for me. Europe is the greatest continent on earth, but EU is not for me Europe, and we are on the wrong path. Like the last thing we're thinking they want to fool us was the election of the European Commissioner. Now it's Ursula von der Leyen, the German lady. But we had the possibility to elect, like there were two candidates touring through Europe, Timmermans and the German guy called Manfred Weber, and they spent a lot of money, and we watched them on TV shows, and it's cool, we can really elect them. And then, boom, hello, I'm Ursula von der Leyen. I don't even know what she stands for, but she's now head of the European Commission. This is, for me, Europe. The European Union is not democratic. It's all, we call it like in a backroom, they do backroom deals, and they fool us.
Okay, Sten Inge, you have to comment on that. It was
a
rather more pessimistic view than you
realistic,
gave us.
Sorry.
No, I think if you look at the EU with some idealistic perspective, I think you're absolutely right. But if you look at the EU as how to make something extremely difficult work a little bit better, then I think you will have another perspective. And to take your points, after one another. First, you talk about the euro. It's something that doesn't work, and you talk about different economies cannot have the same interest rates, for instance.
They can, but then we have a transfer union, and that's what you have to communicate to them.
Yeah. But my point was that if you are going to measure if common currency is good or bad for your country, you need quite a long time range. And in the beginning of the euro was not good for Germany. It has been good recently or lately. And the reason why top economists from the EU, euro area countries are still advising their country to be part of the European currency union is that they say that, okay, there are some disadvantages, but the advantages are still bigger. And I think that what you're saying is that they are all stupid.
No, I don't say.
I do think so.
I don't say they're all stupid, but I think like we're traveling a lot around Europe and Germany, and we speak to a lot of politicians and to a lot of super rich, and you always learn from the super rich, and to a lot of economists and top bankers. And the interesting thing is, if we have got speeches or podiums discussion, they all say, the euro will work. And as soon as we sit at a bar and drink a bottle of wine, they all, honestly, none of them said it will work. They all said it cannot work. And I think we see that it does not work. We are burning now a generation since 10 years. If we look at the youth unemployment rates in Spain, in Italy, in France, in Greece, there's a no future generation for 10 years. We see the euro won't work. And I'm a big supporter of democracy. For me, the worst thing is if we turn into dictatorship. But if we do not end this experiment, there will come people like Salvini, like Le Pen, and people much worse. Because if people, especially young people, have no future,
so
then they vote.
How do you explain that youth unemployment has been reduced in this country? You mentioned it's increasing.
Where is it reduced?
In Spain, in Italy, for instance?
In Italy, then you have to look on the figures. How many young people leave the country? How many Italians?
Yeah, of course.
Left?
No, but okay.
And then
I understand
no,
that you want to paint this as black as possible.
No,
but
no.
Okay.
No,
I would like to let Ben Sofus also have a word in this discussion. We can come back to the EU later, but
I prepared some comments for Sten Inge's.
Yeah. And I would just give you a question, ask you a question, because you have written a book about marketization, and a very critical book. Do you see what do you see as the reasons or the background for this authoritarian tendency that we observe today? Has the market forces something to do with it?
That's a very big question. There's a lot of countries involved. I mean, Russia really never had any democratic tradition, apart from a couple of months in 1917. And Hungary, I just don't know enough about. But I mean, weak democratic traditions in most of Eastern Europe. But I also do think that neoliberalism or neoliberalism EU style has a role to play, because it does increase differences, it does take away social security, it makes people more uncertain. And I think we have pretty solid historical evidence that in uncertain times people, not all people, but people are more vulnerable to temptations from authoritarian rulers. So that is...
so what would your comments to Sten Inge be?
One is that I fundamentally agree with him that the EU needs to get its shit together and try to be more of a superpower. That would be help. It's an extremely complicated project, but as an ambition, I'm in complete agreement with him. A couple of examples would be, for instance, when the UK tried to tax Google, small tiny amount. Americans turn around and say that you will have no deal after Brexit if you do that. And also the sort of big data taxes in EU has been hampered by the US threatening German car manufacturers, or threatening Germany that car manufacturers will get in trouble. So that's one fundamental. And the second lesson from the financial crisis is that the euro has not become a global currency. Europe is still fundamentally dependent upon American dollars. It's a story that is not quite often told, but it's an excellent book that came out a year ago by a British historian called Adam Tooze, where he writes about how the European Central Bank did not have the money to help all the European banks who had made bad investments in the United States, but basically the Americans lent them the money, which also says something about the relationship between the US and Europe when you look underneath Trump. That there are, central bankers, they are, how to put it, I think they're all fundamentally wrong in the same way. So they speak very easily to each other. There's a sort of a fundamental trust in the community of central bankers, and they could use tools from the Bretton Woods era called swaps, which they used to use to defend the individual countries' currencies. Now they could use it to help out European banks who were more weakly funded or weaker capital buffers than even the American banks had. And it was. There's an anecdote that illustrates the relationship on this level in a very nice way. I think I can't remember the day, but around the 17th of September 2008, when AEG, the world's biggest insurer, was about to go belly up, the first meeting point on the agenda of the Open Market Committee in the American Federal Reserve was not AEG; it was the crisis in European banks, and they got help from a lot of. But that's one third. A second, on the third point, I think I probably end up somewhere between Marcus and Sten Inge, that I feel that Europe is mismanaging its economy. It's I'm sorry, Marcus, but it's this German idea of fiscal rectitude that is just. I mean, money is basically free now, and still they're holding back all over Europe with the Germans as the main whip. And the second is that I share a lot of the criticism that he has of the euro, but I would phrase it slightly milder, but I think fundamentally it's sort of...
I said I'm honest.
but so that I'm not quite sure how important it is, but in the long run, if you want legitimacy for the kind of project that Sten Inge wants for Europe and that I sort of am in agreement with at the current point in time, I think you need better economic policies, and you need to be more inclusive. You're actually running the danger of or increasing the risk of authoritarian sympathies in separate European states.
What is wrong with these policies?
Inequalities, they're very unfriendly to growth. There's no real project. There's no Green New Deal. There's no fiscal. It's just cutting back and then subsidizing, keeping alive German and French banks at any cost possible, while you don't really care about people or states.
And Italian banks, we've got like 50% of zombie enterprises in the Eurozone continuously rising. Like we make an easy example. For example, this young lady has a lot of debt. Yeah, let's say 500,000. You've lost your job and your husband is running away as well. And then you have to go to the bank, and I'm the bank, and said, I need more money. What would you guys do if you were the bank? What would you tell her? Yeah, you would probably say, sorry, no more money. Now this beautiful lady is Italy. Like, they've got the highest debt, they have high unemployment, they've got an economic growth like 30 years ago in the value. The industrial production is on the level of 30 years ago. And she gets more money and cheaper money than ever because Mr. Draghi said whatever it takes. And this is absolute nonsense. This is crazy, and this is what happened in the Eurozone. Normally, they should not pay an interest rate less than 4%. They should pay an interest rate like 40%. That means they are bankrupt. And the same is with Greece. And this is what the Euro does as well.
Sten Inge, are you painting a rosy picture while the facts on the ground are quite different?
Well, I didn't go into the economic side of things in my presentation. And if I did, I would have agreed that there are some systematic failures in the financial architecture. And it is also, as is being said here, it is probably very detrimental to the EU-wide interest, but maybe also even in Germany's own interest, to hold back on the spending like they are doing. So there are many things here that we can discuss when it comes to failures in the economic cooperation. But what I wanted to focus on was the challenge from the authoritarian big powers in the world, and to see if Europe, if it got its act together and could step up, and if they were acting with one voice in the world, they could probably hit back. But they would not be able to do that alone. That was sort of my point.
Okay.
Yeah, let's stick to that. And Sofus first.
No, I'd like to say something nice about Europe. And that is
I hope there's a lot of nice things to say.
no, but I mean, optimistic in power terms. After the picture is complex, and I think Europe is still in possession of a lot of what some of my colleagues refer to as soft power. You can take. Have you ever heard about anybody wanting to watch a Chinese sitcom or Chinese celebrities that sort of create a stir? Anyway, we produce them in Europe, we produce them in the US, or. It was interesting. It stopped me in my tracks when Sten Inge said that other countries will want to copy the Chinese model, and I was thinking, how can he say that? And you were referring to authoritarian leaders that probably will take lessons and they want social credit system and stuff like that. But I think the populations around the world, to the degree that they are informed, are attracted to European and American values, not to Chinese and Russian, and that actually matters. If you look at 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall, I mean, in a way, it was. It's a complicated story again, but fundamentally it was also about a population wanting a different kind of, wanting to live somewhere else, or want the ability to move somewhere else. And that, if you ask young people around the world, in almost anywhere, I think where they want to go is Europe and the States. It's not to China
and many
or
risk
Russia.
their lives even to go to
do it. So that I think that is, and then. Or maybe I can save that to later because there are so many issues. But I'd also like to say a couple of words about what Russia and China and the US is, because we're talking about them as threats to Europe. But it's also interesting to take sort of a brief look behind the curtain in each of those three countries and talk about sort of where they're heading.
We can manage. But Matthias, isn't there a case for Sten Inge's position that size matters? If you want to stand up to the big companies like Google and Amazon, make them pay taxes, or to dictators, authoritarian regimes, you have to be big and stand together.
Fully agree. Fully agree. I believe in Europe, and Germany alone or Norway alone, it's a joke. If you compare it to the world, we have to be Europe, but we have to be a strong economic union, but not the political union. because that does not work out. We've seen it, it won't work out. But we have to stand together. Otherwise, I can say, and that is then really dark, we'll be gone, because on the one side there's America, and on the other side is China, and maybe there's even India. Russia, I don't see that much danger. But if we don't stand together, economic-wise, we're gone. With the army, I'm not a fan of armies. We can forget that, because if the Americans would leave Germany and Europe, I think we all would have a big problem, because our army is in a condition, if Russia would like to come, they would come. So easy. That should be just clear. And I think we don't want to have a next atomic war in Europe, so let's better talk about economics than about armies and wars, because we, at the moment, in Europe, won't win that war without the Americans.
But what kind of construction should that be? You say that the euro is a mistake and there should not be a political union, but in what way should the European nations stand together then?
Honest, because that would hurt my German fellows. Southern Europe will never ever pay its debt. We have to release the debt to keep the European Union. Then we have to give them something like Germany got after the Second World War, a Marshall Plan, to help them to boost the industry. Then they have to have their own currency. And then we have to have something like the Montana Union we had like 30, 40 years ago. But with the political union, I'm traveling a lot, and I've got a lot of friends all over Europe and the world. And if I talk to them, especially with the young people, more and more younger people, especially in Italy, but also in France and Spain. I'm 3 months a year, I don't live in Germany. Yeah? And if I talk to young people, they are not pro-European Union anymore. And there's always the biggest mistake, also with the Brexit. The British did not vote against Europe. They've voted against the European Union. And always to put the same thing like Europe is the European Union. No, for me it's not. For me, Europe is the best continent in the world, and the EU is not great for me.
Yeah, you refer to like conversation on cafes and with people in the street, but actually there is agreement between those who are following public opinion on the support of the EU that has actually been increasing for quite a long time now. And that is right at the moment, it's in a 35-year high. Over 2/3 of the population find it a good idea that their country is member of the European Union. And I'm just saying that your argument against this is not very convincing.
Yeah, but if you talk about the polls were also for Hillary Clinton. My business partner said in German TV, Donald Trump will win the election. Ooh, we got like really nice emails because the polls said something different. We said on TV there will be a Brexit. We got like angry mails, and there was a Brexit. And I think I'm not just sitting in cafes and bars. I meet like a lot of entrepreneurs, politicians, like also from all through the society. And I see the feeling, because when we had the thing with Trump, for us in the media, it was impossible that Trump will win. Because if we think about America, we think about the East and the West, and we think about Florida. But sorry, in between, they're living a couple of people as well, and they're totally different at the East and the West Coast and Florida. And everybody can make a poll, and I don't believe in those polls, and I didn't believe in Brexit and Trump in those polls, and it was twice right.
But there are many polls that are right. Many countries, you will see that it actually fits in with what we had expected actually happened. So, but you're so certain that...
I hope you are right, but wait till the next recession will come, and that will come. And when the money is not flowing anymore like it was, and then we see who is pro and who's anti.
I'd just like to build on something else Matthias said. He said that he wanted a debt forgiveness and a Marshall Plan, and I think or Marshall Plan style policies, and I fully agree. I think people don't realize the details of what went on when Greece got in trouble, for instance. I mean, it's a long history. A lot of the debt was from the dictatorship period, and then they have a deficient taxing system. But basically, what they needed at day one of the crisis was 50 billion euros. The European Central Bank distributed like 80 billion euros a day for periods, and even more, to banks, to other states. But Greece has really been downtrodden. There are also details in the way Ireland has been treated, Portugal has been treated, which is, to my mind, it's perverse, and it serves absolutely no purpose at all. It doesn't help the creditors. You can't bleed the country dry. And I mean, when you have a situation in Europe, when you're turning a European country into a third world country, where people are dying from antibiotics-resistant bacteria because they're running out of sort of simple, vad heter det? Medicinsk sprit, or people with diabetes are dying because you can't import insulin. And you have the picture. I mean, they disagreed originally about sort of youth unemployment, but it has been enormous. And it's been falling down from an enormous level. This is not the way to run a continent if you want that continent to be stronger and the political leadership to have legitimacy.
Can I just say one thing why it's decreasing? Because, for example, in Greece, if you are for 12 months unemployed, you fall out of the statistics. Over 800,000 young Spanish people left their country. And if Angela Merkel in Germany says, oh yeah, all those young people are welcome, yeah, for sure we need all those super qualified engineers and doctors. But two things. Who paid for their education? It was Spain, it was Greece, it was Italy. And those people are missing in this country to rebuild the country. And if one doctor after another in Spain and Greece closes the gates and I better go to Germany, to Switzerland for a future, I think that won't help for a European vibe, pro-European vibe in Spain and Switzerland. And I can say a land without young people is a land without future. And if the brain drain continues, then you can be 100% sure that ultra-nationalists will win the elections.
Well, I can maybe comment quick on both to your point there. I mean, the migration, the brain drain from non-EU member states to EU member states was bigger before the Eastern enlargement of the European Union. When these countries became members, they actually got investments that made it more reasonable for people to stay. So if you look historically on this, actually the brain drain situation is quite different.
What's with Greece, Spain, Italy?
Yes, but now we're talking about the big picture. But of course, the crisis-ridden countries of the south, they have gone where they have possibilities, you know, to get jobs. That is not a mystery. That is part of all our history, of Norway's history as well. But when it comes to your point about how the EU has sort of kept a country like Greece down, and you did the example of medicines. People couldn't, you know, they could die of something that is totally preventable. I don't know if you're aware of what would happen if Greece would not get the support from the EU that it actually got after the crisis. If they had turned themselves bankrupt. They don't produce almost any medicine alone, and they owed medicine or pharmaceutical companies billions of euros before this happened. It would have stopped completely. So all the people in Greece who needed medical aid would not get it if it was not for the constant inflow of money from the EU. So I think that's quite important to remember here.
All right. Let's go back to our initial question about Europe's position in the world. Let's say that despite the polls, Donald Trump is re-elected in the US, that Russia and China continues in an authoritarian direction. What impact will that have on Europe's standing in the world and Europe's willingness to unite?
You ask me?
Yes, I can begin with you.
Yeah. Well, I think that Donald Trump is so unpopular in Europe, and he's become a sort of a symbol of what we don't want to be. And that maybe has to do, there is a link to that, and also with Brexit, that what's happened in the UK tells us something about who we don't want to be. Because you can see who are the voters who vote for Trump and who are the voters who voted for Brexit. But then, of course, they also have supporters, and then we have countries like Norway and other countries who have the same tendencies of polarization. So it's really open, you know, to see what this leads to in the long term. In the same way that it's open to see if Europe can get its act together and actually overcome the national vetoes on foreign policy. That depends on many, many factors. So I guess what I was explaining was more a hope than actually a description of something that is very probable or very likely to happen soon. Yeah.
But it isn't, if Europe unites more and gives more power to the central organs and so on, wouldn't that inspire the populist and authoritarian forces that already resent this development?
Well, if you say that they can, if you can separate foreign policy from other policy areas, I mean, Eurobarometer, which is measuring the opinion polls, is doing that, and they find the highest public support for integration on foreign and defense policies. It's over 75%. So at least there is a sign that people think that in exactly these areas, it is more like they are more likely to support it. But if you look at the like more social areas, like taxation, it was mentioned here that, we should get our act together and no longer have tax havens in Europe. That is much more difficult because it's seen as a very important part of national competence to have their own taxation and their own welfare policy. So these areas are much harder to move. And I think that would be the areas that would give the populists, real ground, would be if we started to integrate on taxation or welfare. That would be more, I think, more dangerous in that perspective.
What do you think, Matthias?
Honestly, the number one superpower at the moment still is the United States. And Donald Trump is more different and less diplomatic than all other presidents before. And I don't hope that it will happen, but I think it will. If Europe says, okay, to the Americans, now we do it our way, and we are their own power, what would be if Donald Trump says, okay, then do your own stuff. I'll leave the NATO. America does not need the NATO. And I put all my forces out of Europe. And then we think, oh, it's better the NATO and Donald Trump, or maybe what do the Russians do? Because this is our topic. We Europe, yeah, we are morally, we're on the top, but we are weak, we are small, we don't have the army, and always the strongest on the playground is number one. It is like this, and this is Donald Trump and USA and Putin on the other side, and we must admit we are much richer maybe than Russia. But if the Russians want to come, as I said it before, they will come. So we need Donald Trump and the NATO. Donald Trump and the USA do not need the NATO. They can stay for themselves. They can be safe. I hope they won't do it, yeah, honestly. But they can. And then we have real problems.
Ben Sofus.
Can I have two thoughts at the same time? Just quickly back to Sten Inge about the Greece and medicines. I think that sounds like something that came out of the information department of the European Central Bank or the German Ministry of Finance. To me, that's an absurd way of telling the story. I mean, then you accept that they needed to have a crisis. They could have been helped at a much lower price than what European banks were helped at. But maybe we should get the last word. Maybe we should close that and go back to the big power.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Because of my job, I'm in sort of fairly regular contact with American professors of political science, and in all the emails,
all Trump supporters, I suppose.
yes, Trump, staunch Democrats and to the left, or else they probably wouldn't want to deal with me. But the point is that in their emails these days, it's saying that I'm counting the days until impeachment. And meanwhile, could you do some work for me, or something like that? And the point is that there is a fairly strong possibility that in a year's time, or 1.5 years' time, we won't have Trump. And we just had a workshop in Oslo where we talked about U.S.-American relations. That was sort of the main topic. And I'm not particularly good at it, but some of the people who are good at it talked about that. They were sort of looking, okay, so there's a maybe more than 50% chance that Trump will either just last this period or not even his full period. What will happen then? If you get a Democratic president, they were imagining some sort of honeymoon. Oh, we're back together, or somebody has been divorced and then getting back together. Everybody will be so relieved that a complete moron is out of the White House, and that we can actually start doing our normal unsympathetic business again. Just behaving like big states with a lot of power and not too much respect for the poor people, and the climate and stuff. Normal politics the way we know it. So that is. I'm not sure how much that changes in Sten Inge's analysis, but I think it's an interesting perspective to it. And a friend of mine who I called up because I knew a friend of mine always has good ideas. He said that, remember that Russia is fundamentally pathetic. They are just a weak power that is sitting there trying to destroy what everybody else have. They have no vision, they have a weak economy, but they're very good at can I use an impolite language? They're very good at trying to fuck up what goes on in other countries, but that, in a way, is a fundamentally pathetic role to play in world politics. I'm not quite sure what to make of that statement, but I thought it sounded good, so so I would repeat it here and see if anything interesting comes out of it.
In dollars, the Russian defense budget is about the same as the Norwegian health and social budget. Of course, you get more for your dollars in Russia than in Norway, but anyway. Any questions? No. Yes, please.
The role of China, can you comment on that, please? Technologically, we see that they are invading privacy at magnitude that we have never seen before, and it hasn't been mentioned at all. I mean, that goes together with authoritarian regimes. Aren't you worried about that?
Yes.
Yeah, social credit score system is the most horrible idea I think I've heard about since Holocaust. You know, it's a complete violation of everything we believe in, and it's very scary to think that it's even possible to think about the relationship between state and society in that way. But I'm very uneducated on China. But I'd love to hear my. But can I ask? What are actually China's ambitions? Do we know that? Are they? You know, they're rising and rising, and then we extrapolate and think that okay, they will be like the world dominating factor. But isn't there something insular about China as well? So are we sure that would the Chinese want to rule us, or are they happy with sort of having a belt of countries around them that they control, and then otherwise, you know, to be a strong economy?
Anyone want to answer that one?
We just want to be number one. That's all. That's the plan. China should become the superpower number one. That's the deal.
I think they have
20 years.
It's a long-term perspective. Like they used to be the middle kingdom, and they want to become the biggest again. I think that's. But they are patient, and they are doing it step by step.
Like that famous remark about the French Revolution and too early to.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, the danger with China is they're smart, very smart. Like when I studied 20 years ago in Australia, there were 4 Chinese. They could not speak the language. They could not read. I was thinking, what do they do at the top course for economics, and all the Aussie guys and girls, and they're funny, they'll never make it. Those guys were day and night at the library while we were partying and having fun and studying, and they had the best exams of the whole year. And those guys are working so hard while we're whinging, 35 hours per week is too much, and now I go to yoga and all this stuff. Those guys are working 40, 50, 60 hours. Yeah, you're laughing. But they soon laugh at us.
Can I ask you, are you a Protestant or a Catholic?
I left church.
I mean, your cultural background.
It's Catholic.
What is it?
Yeah, it's not
disappointing.
Okay, maybe we have to conduct this debate in 10 years in Chinese. I don't know.
That will be tricky.
But any more questions? Still have a couple of minutes. Please.
I have a question for Matthias, please. My name is Henrik.
Hi, Henrik.
Hi, Matthias. I have a question for you. You say that the U.S. don't need NATO, that Europe does, basically. But in my mind, the role of the U.S. or what the U.S. wants in Europe is an outer defense. And if you look at the biggest military base in Europe today, as far as I understand, that is to be found in Kosovo. And it's American. It's a NATO base.
Yeah, the biggest US base is in Germany as well, Ramstein.
Yeah. So, so how do you account for the fact that the US does not need NATO?
Because in now we've got different. The next war, if there will be a war between Russia and America, there will be a rocket war. And they've got the rocket shields, and it won't be Donald. It sounds hard, but if you ask probably Donald Trump on a map where's Europe, he won't find it. So he does not care. It's not that important for them. America can survive for itself. Now they even have their own oil. Yeah? They don't need us. And as a defense line, they've got a massive ocean around them, which you can protect. They do not need. They honestly don't need Europe. We need them much more. They don't need us.
Why do they have all these NATO bases all around Russia? That's it. That's it. What's the point?
That's a good question. Why is? But this was before. All the NATO bases went there before Trump. And I don't know if Trump wants to have them all there. I all went there before Trump, and I think also it's with Russia. It's always a tricky topic.
No, the presence of American troops in Europe has increased under Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do we honestly want a war between America and Russia? Then we will be gone in Europe. That's it. So we can have more and more troops. I grew up in Germany, and we had this crazy border and wall in between, and we always knew it was dancing like on a volcano. The next war, there'll be atomic war, and Germany would be in the absolute middle. We'd be gone.
I think I'll stop you there. I'm sorry, Sten Inge. You sounded a very optimistic tone in your introduction.
Didn't work out.
We ended with Chinese world power and World War.
No, no, we don't want to have that one. That's what I said. We have to prevent that. That's why I don't want to talk about this army stuff, because it's nonsense.
Okay, thank you very much, Sten Inge, Matthias, and Sofus, and thank you everyone.